Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Amen. Okay, today we're going to be talking about an extremely important subject. The subject is, let's see how Kushairi calls it, human companionship for God's sake. Simple Arabic, sukhba. Okay. The only sheikh I knew who called his gatherings sukhba was
Abu Qasim?
no, Sheikh Nuh. But all of them talked about sukhba, companionship, choosing the right company. It's a big issue. People don't know how beneficial and how dangerous it could be to have good company or bad company. I think another group that emphasizes this point are the tabligh, and it's a very important point. In other words, in modern lingo, who do you hang out with? Because it's going to impact who you are. As we say in English, birds of a feather flock together. Okay, so we want to be amongst the peacocks and not amongst the crows. We want to be with the right birds. Okay. Now it gets a little complex. We'll go into that too. But let's remember first of all, okay, when we associate with people, there's a phenomenon which I don't hear many spiritual teachers talking about. There's a phenomenon of transmission. And how it works is that we're all like radios that emanate a certain frequency and receive a certain frequency. Okay. So we're putting out, or to use the hippie term, vibes. We're putting out bad vibes or good vibes, and other people are as well. So if we're around bad vibe people a lot, we're going to imbibe that. It's going to become part of us. And one of the places I saw this in the most shocking way, I'd say, is when I used to attend psychiatry conferences. And I would see the psychiatrist, not talking about the patients here, the psychiatrist in this conference, in a terrible state. None of them felt it. None of them knew it, because to know it you have to have some inner vision, which they don't. But I could see it on their faces. Maybe their wives know about it, but or their husbands. Nowadays, a lot of female psychiatrists. But it was obvious to me. And the reason they don't know it is because they're stuck in their minds. So they have all these clarifying concepts, DSM-5 or the psychoanalytic diagnoses and concepts. They have all these concepts, so they're pleased with themselves and their work. But they're not aware, because they're associating, even on a professional, it doesn't matter professional or non-professional. This is universal. There's too much professionalism going on, as if everything's okay. How was your doctor? Oh, very professional. As if that means anything. Very professional, dressed in a white coat or using scientific terms that no one understands. Very professional. The only term more overused than professional is scientific. He presented a very rigorous scientific paper. As if. Okay, so they're very professional. They're picking up all day these negative vibrations. Because when you're in psychiatry, the people, they're either anxious or depressed or agitated or psychotic, or they can't be in a good vibe or in a good state, or they wouldn't be coming to see a psychiatrist generally. I mean, there are exceptions and people who use the process to learn, but mostly if you're a psychiatrist treating psychiatric patients, you're going to be in bad vibe zone all day, and it impacts on your soul. And most of the time you're not even aware of the impact. I remember even myself when I was working at the hospital, I was driving home one day or working at my office, and I'm driving home one day. Suddenly all these depressive ideas are coming into my mind. Everything's looking negative and bleak, and I'm saying, one second, I'm not that kind of person. I might have a lot of faults, but I'm not a depressive person. Generally an optimistic, positive person, I believe. Anyway, so I'm thinking, where are all these depressive thoughts coming from? Then I remember the last client I saw was in a pretty bad depression. I had picked up their state, hal we call it in Arabic, without realizing it, and so now I too was depressed. Once I realized it, I was able to clear it out. Other times I had to do meditation, take showers, do dhikr, whatever, to get rid of the negative state. So be careful who you associate with. It's very, very important in terms of the outcome. And the Quran in numerous places encourages us to associate with other believers, other people who are on the same path. But believers, for those of you who've been around for a while, is not always a safe category. There are all kinds of believers out there, and some of them. I remember when I used to show up to Sheikh Nazim's Zawiya in London, he was always saying, "Oh, Dr. Ibrahim, we're so happy to have you. Welcome to our insane asylum." And there were quite a few crazy people there. Not terribly agitated. We were all picking up the good vibes of Sheikh Nazim, so we were riding along on that. Okay, so when we talk about this subject, we get to something an idea that's become prominent in my mind ever since I heard it from one of my least favorite people, Obama. He talking about the Middle East, he said, people have to understand the complexity. What did he mean? Because everyone is on one side or the other side giving you the mantras of their echo chambers, whether they're Zionist, Muslim, liberals. Everyone is giving you their echo chamber narrative. Okay, and that's not the way to truth, and truth is often much more complex, or some people say nuanced, than that. And what do I mean? I mean that there's a lot of nuances here and complexity in the sense that there are, for example, contradictions. Okay, so let's start with families. Okay. Now, families aren't, I wouldn't say often, but often enough are not the best people to associate with. Our families. My audience of one is laughing, he's right. But at the same time, the Quran and the Sunnah incite us to spend time with our families, not to break off ties with our parents or our extended families, bir walidain, rachim wasila, kinds of concepts to encourage us to be with our families, which is not always the best place to be. But we have some obligation towards them. So we have to balance both of those ideas, that we need to be in the best possible place, but we also need to honor our responsibilities towards our families. I could tell you all kinds of stories, even amongst believers in the same religion, where the families are having negative impacts, and sometimes people have to get distance. In my psychiatric practice, I had a formula, which I worked mostly in French at that time. It was called the formula Noël Pâques, which means Christmas, Easter. There are some people who could only see their families twice a year. If they saw them anymore, they literally went ballistic. They lost it. They became depressed, some suicidal. We had a friend who, whenever she'd go visit her mother in Toronto, she'd come back suicidal because she spent too much time there, and other people would go actually psychotic. I worked one year in the emergency room a day or two after Christmas. It was bedlam. All the people who had decompensated after spending time with their families. So Muslims may be shocked, but that is the reality. So some people have very harmonious families. They enjoy their time. They don't get into too many fights, but many, it's the opposite. So there's a contradiction with our Islamic values, if you will. Then there are another area of complexity. There are some groups, like there was one Sufi group that I was with, where all the people are good, virtuous, God-fearing, well-behaved group. This one was a Maghribian Sufi group, and the teacher would encourage the brothers to stay together, but wasn't very enjoyable, let's say. And I remember in that group, first of all, everyone knows what they all think. Everyone thinks the same. No one's really interested in exploring other subjects, broadening their horizons. And so even though they were coming from a pious, God-fearing, steadfast, good character generally, it wasn't very interesting to spend time around them, unfortunately. And what tended to happen in that group is only Maghribians would stick around. Anyone else, not only non-Muslims, Pakistanis, Arabs from other parts of the Arabic world, no one would stick around except for these Maghribians from Morocco and Tunisia. There was something not palpable that was just too ethnic about them. It was very ethnocentric. So here you have a group of what are good people, not only good people, but not only God-fearing, but mystical in inclination, because it was genuinely about Fanan Baka, about mystical realization, but still it wasn't very agreeable to spend a lot of time in those contexts. So that's another issue. So, as they say in contemporary parlance, it was a mixed bag. A lot of these are mixed bags of good and bad, and then you have to decide what's most appropriate. Then there are the bad vibe people, if you want, that we're obliged to spend time with. It could be a nasty person at work that we can't get rid of. Or it could be some agnostic, atheist people that we have to work with or learn from. My two most important teachers, and they were great, brilliant teachers, forever grateful, in psychiatry. The first one was a world-renowned psychiatrist, Dr. Heinz Lehmann. And he was like a Prussian sort, very German, very serious, very smart, but dour. It wasn't... he was a very principled, self-disciplined man, but from everything I saw, I claimed to be a Catholic, but I didn't see much light there. But yet, it was good for me to be there because I learned a lot. And my other major teacher was a gay Catholic man. Okay. Put that together. And this was before it was, acceptable to be. Well, it's still not acceptable, I don't think, to be gay and Catholic. I'm not sure how they deal with it. Some of the Anglicans in some of the churches, Protestant church, you can be a gay pastor, but it wasn't like that in those days. And this fellow, I didn't even know he was gay until my training was all over. He was a brilliant physician, very humanistic, very good teacher, understood all the different theories, and I learned a lot from him, although I wouldn't call him a good vibe person. It wasn't going to elevate my status. So there's all these contradictions and nuances and complexities we have to deal with, and you'll have to take it situation by situation and use, as usual, your wisdom, your discernment to see where you should be spending your time and where you shouldn't. But we can't be absolutist about it. Okay. So that's my brief take on Sukhba. Oh yeah, as in my story about the depressed patient, if you want to know what transmission you're picking up in any given context, then just wait till you're out of the context and look inside and see where you're at. If you're feeling good, alhamdulillah, that may have been a good context. If you're feeling anxious or depressed or down or angry, maybe that wasn't such a good place to spend time with. So be careful, because if you spend too much time in dark places with bad vibe people, you're going to end up being depressed. It's as simple as that. No matter what you're thinking, the depressive vibe is going to imprint itself on you. Okay, so that's my take. We're doing a bit of Fareed Zakaria today. Fareed Zakaria, I like his program, GPS, CNN, I'm doing a little publicity. CNN, Sunday, he gives a good resume of the week in politics, and he starts by saying, this is my take, and then he brings in some experts. Okay, so that's my take, and now we're going to bring in the experts, or the people, the Sufis and others that are in a higher state, to see what they say about this same question. So, one of the most famous, Islamically, one of the most famous situations of companionship was between the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr Siddiq, his closest companion, and the story when they were traveling together to escape from Mecca to Medina in the Hijrah, and they were in a cave, and there was a snake, I think, and Abu Bakr was trying to hold it back, and the Prophet ﷺ saw him, and he was afraid, Abu Bakr, that maybe they'd get caught, and the Prophet ﷺ reassured him, don't you realize Allah's with us, we're protected. Okay, so that's a case of good companionship and good advice. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, is transmitting his highest level of faith to his friend Abu Bakr. Okay. Now there was lots of companionship. The Sahabas, same root word as suhba, companionship. They were all the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and many of them, not most, were in very high states just by being his companion. So that's how powerful it can be. So let's read a little bit. This is all from Kushairi, one of the great Sufis who's tried to synthesize some of the teachings, and we'll read a few things and maybe comment. True companionship is of three sorts, he says. Keeping company with those who are above you. So, democratic illusions aside, there are people who on the spiritual path are above us. There are people who are below us, also important. Doesn't mean we're vain and proud if we recognize some people are behind us in the path, and there are some people at the same level. And it's important to have some awareness of it. So, true companionship is of three sorts. So, keeping company with those who are above you, which in essence is service. Okay, so if you realize that someone around you is in a higher state, I've been in that situation many times with Sheikh Nazim, Sheikh Abu Qasim, others, Baba Muhammad. If you realize that someone that you're keeping company with is above you in rank, is further advanced spiritually, then the right attitude is service. You want to help them to do their mission, which is important. Or keeping company with those who are below you, which requires sympathy and compassion in the one who is followed, and harmony and respect in the follower. Sympathy and compassion in the one who is followed, and harmony and respect in the follower. Okay? So, nowadays everyone thinks they're equal. You know, I've had this even in my small-scale teachings. People who They think everyone's opinion is the same. Isn't my opinion as good as yours?
No.
Could be, but in the cases I'm thinking of, no. No. I've been working for 55 years on this, and you've led your life in a reflex way without thinking too much and just concerned with the dunya. No, your opinion is not the same. There's a hierarchy of truth involved. That's one thing I learned from Islam. There are hierarchies of beings. We're not, this democracy illusion is nonsense. We're not, just the same way I can't tell a cardiac surgeon how to do his surgery. He knows more about that than me. Then there's some people, you can't tell them about their spiritual rank because they're higher than you. And keeping companies with peers and equals, which is based on preferring others to oneself and maintaining... Okay, that's a whole other level. Your brothers, your real brothers who are on the same level as you, and you have to keep respect for them. Now, there is a place here, I'm trying to remember exactly where I found it, but the point is, if you're with someone who is beneath you in understanding, you shouldn't just be amenable. You shouldn't just be the nice guy, the people pleaser, the Justin Trudeau, cardinal example of people pleaser. You know, that's not your role. If there's someone who has less understanding than you, then you have to take it upon yourself to teach them. They might not like it, but that's the price you pay for trying to be a teacher. And you say, well, who do you think you are? Why should you know better than me? Well, because I've been working at it for 50 years and you've been, just going along easily in life, doing what you wanted to do and what your nafs told you to do. No. Of course you have to be diplomatic about it, but part of our religion, which is different from liberalism and relativism, is Amr al-Maruf and Nehi al-Munkar, which means enjoin the good. So if you're in that state of a teacher, you encourage people in the good, and Nehi al-Munkar, and you forget the evil. What you're doing there is wrong. Now, there's some simple, if you want, fiqh examples. We had one person in the Naqshbandi Tariqat who was freely selling alcohol and lotto tickets in his handy store. It's against our religion. And, if you're in a position, you can say, this isn't right. Recently, I've come up against this in a very funny way that may seem banal, but there are a lot of the youth, Muslim youth, are following the sunnah of the World Cup, soccer players, instead of following the sunnah of the Prophet. So you go in, and sometimes their fathers who are very proud of them, maybe rightfully so, and they shave part of their head, or they leave a stripe in the middle like the Apaches, like the pagans, and they shave. This is not allowed in our religion. And it just happened to be actually when I went to RIS, but the guy was decent about it. I saw he was a regular Muslim. I said, do you not know that this is against the Sunnah? We're not supposed to look like World Cup soccer people who are trying to look like pagans and shamans. That's not our way. So sometimes they complain, but sometimes they listen. And this guy's case said, oh, okay, yeah, I heard about it. I'm going to check it out. And I think he took it seriously. But that's part of our religion, to correct people. Now, that's a simple matter. There are a lot tougher things to deal with than that. But that's one of the matters. So we're not going to be politically correct. I see this with the youth. A lot of them are afraid to confront their friends. They don't want to make waves, as they say. Everything, even if the friends are doing something completely wrong, they know it. Maybe even the friend, they won't say anything. I see this with my own children. And this is not the way we're meant to be as Muslims or as Sufis. If there's something to correct, you should be able to correct it. If you can't and the person is stuck in arrogance and pride, okay, that's their business. I had an incident at the mosque. There was this young man, he'd come to Jummah prayer in jeans. And then once, twice, I saw he's a serious Muslim, and so one time I happened to be with him. I said, jeans is not appropriate. The Christians, they wear their Sunday bests. Why are you wearing jeans? Oh, you don't understand. Jeans are fashionable. I said, jeans are made for farmers. I learned that from Fritz of Scham, of all places. Jeans are farmers' clothing. They're not clothing to come celebrate your Lord with them. And he was very unhappy with me. Don't you want to discuss? I said, there's nothing to discuss. Another democratic illusion. Discussion. We're going to, like they do in the U.S. House of Representatives. They discuss. We're going to resolve things by discussion. Yeah, right. So he went away like upset with me. And then the next week, just to show me that he wouldn't listen, he came with jogging pants. Even worse than jeans. Jogging. I didn't say anything. It was an invitation to criticize. I didn't say anything. The week after that, for 2 or 3 months, he came wearing lovely Sunnah clothes. And then he regressed after that. Back to the jeans and the tight pants and whatever. But I'm not his teacher, so I can't. With Hadi, one of my students, I'll repeat it until he gets it. But with someone I meet at the mosque, okay, I told him if he doesn't care, he doesn't care. In all fairness, I said this once to a specialist doctor. Imagine the rank. A gastroenterologist at another mosque. I said, jeans, no. But he instantly listened. And every time after that, he was always dressed in fine clothes, usually Sunnah clothes. So he listened, even though he was a doctor. I should have had to listen to him. But I'm equal. I'm also a specialist, but retired now. Okay, let's hear what... There's a lot of stuff here. When someone who is beneath you in development keeps company with you, as if you were both of the same degree, you betray that companionship if you do not let him know that this will diminish his own state. So, in other words, if you have a higher level of understanding and this guy is playing it like he's your equal, by not putting him in his place in some way, you're belittling, you're preventing him from learning, and you're lowering yourself. Don't play the game. Now, how you handle this, there are all kinds of issues of diplomacy and not offending people, but don't just be a politically correct, people pleaser liberal. That's not the way. A man kept company with Ibrahim ibn Adam, one of the great Sufis. And when he wanted to depart, asked, this is the other side of the coin, if you have seen any fault in me, please let me know of it. And Ibrahim ibn Adam, he was in a very high state, obviously. I have not seen any fault in you, said Ibrahim, because I have looked upon you with the eye of love, so that everything I saw of you seemed good to me. Ask someone else about your faults. Okay. What Sheikh Nazim would do would get you married. Then you had someone next to you always who would be able to see your faults. Was your husband or your what? They would tell you all your faults. You didn't need the sheikh to tell you that. But this is one state. When you're in a high state of love, you don't see any imperfections. But you can't live there. There are times where you have to point out to people what might be their imperfection or what they might have to... Then there's the whole issue of, which is important to cover before we leave this, is about, well, how do you deal with atheists and agnostics? There are lots of them around nowadays. It's not easy. You can't avoid them. I think in Canada now, maybe in the United States also, it's the fastest growing religion is non-religion. I think the last statistic I saw, something like 40% of Canadians do not identify with any religion. They're agnostic, or some of them are atheists. How do you deal with it? Well, Abu Hatim said that al-Zakak, this was one of his sheikhs, said, whoever is not accompanied by fear of God and moral watchfulness, that's wara in Arabic, in this business eats what is totally unlawful. Okay, that's a metaphor. It's a metaphor. It doesn't mean he's necessarily eating pork or something like that. But it means that you have to be careful, and I think part of it is, don't be nasty with these people, but don't spend your time hanging out with agnostics and atheists who are rejecting God. It's not good for you and it's not good for them, because you're going to end up at best, you're going to end up in a serious argument and they won't listen to you anyway. So limit your time in those kind of contexts. It's full of them at the universities. If you're a university student, you may have to put up with it. But in other situations, try to spend more time with people who are believers, who are trying to be pious, who are mystics, who are looking for enlightenment. It will be better for your own hal, for your own state, to spend time with them. That's what's going to help you improve your hal. The Nun al-Misri, another great Sufi mystic, said, do not attempt to keep company with God unless you conform to his will. Okay, we're trying to do that. Nor with people unless you give them good counsel. Again, the same point. I think this is an important point that maybe we can leave it. Don't abstain from giving good counsel just because you want to be liked. Okay, now you have to give it skillfully, as the Buddhists say. I like that term. You have to give the counsel skillfully, but give it anyway. And if they don't like it, let them go on their way, or let them be temporarily upset. You may be surprised. I've had several points in my life where someone else gave me good counsel, and it changed my life for the better. Although I could have been upset. I was thinking recently of a girlfriend of mine before I was Muslim who told me I was a positivist. She was actually giving me great counsel. I didn't realize it. Positivism is a form of empiricism. And I just, instead of saying, how could you tell me that? Who do you think you are? You think you're better than me? You think you're smarter than me? No, somewhere inside of me it says there's something there. I stuck with it. I studied it. I took a sabbatical on it. And gradually I got out of this emphasis on the external, out of empiricism, out of this scientific mode where everything is concrete and outer, into a more subtle mode. I started with the arts. I didn't get into mysticism. I went from the arts to psychology, and then gradually I worked my way forward. I was going to say backward, but forward to mysticism. So don't play the nice guy. It's not good for you, and it's not good for them. And if they get upset, that's plenty of people got upset, as you may have noticed, with Muhammad, peace be upon him. Plenty of people, even more possibly, got upset with Jesus, and peace be upon him. And plenty of people got upset with Moses. So people getting upset with you is not the end of the world. You might have done something good. When I used to hear at funerals, often you'll hear somebody, no one had a bad word to say about this guy. This guy is a lost cause. No one had a bad, that means he never took the risk of saying something that they wouldn't like. He was a people pleaser. That's not what we're aiming to be. We're aiming to be a God pleaser, and we're aiming to underline the good and, to the extent possible, discourage the evil. That's our job as Muslims, as Sufis, as spiritual seekers. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, salamun ala mursalin, alhamdulillah. Okay, so during the next few weeks we'll be talking about positive characteristics of the Sufi way. to counter what we talked about on previous videos about the klisas, the negative things that block us. These are the positive things like good companionship. And then after Ramadan, we'll do a series on Sufi of the week. So see you there soon. And for those who are coming to Wisal tomorrow night, please think about the content of this talk, and we'll talk more tomorrow. Amin, amin, ya Rabbil Amin, al-Fatiha.